H.P. Lovecraft was a tortured soul who was a master writer of his time, with famous works such as The Call of Cthulhu, The Shadow over Innsmouth, or even the Dunwich Horror. And many of these do have adaptations in the horror community of film, but today we're going to be talking about one that is quite nostalgic from the 80s and isn't a bad movie starring our boy Will Wheaton. And that is 1987's The Curse, based off the story The Color Out of Space. This shit's about to get cosmic, so come hang out. What up, y'all? Welcome back to Fandom of the Indie Review. I am your host. There are worms in the apple, damn. We're on the journey of 4,000 subscribers by my 31st birthday. That's coming up in February. I want to thank the people that have been sticking around since day one. The community here is magical. So if any of that sounds fun to you, if you want to talk about a hidden gem from the 80s, come hang out and give me a subby. H.P. Lovecraft began writing The Color Out of Space in March 1927, immediately after completing the case of Charles Dexter Ward. As he wrote the tale, however, he was also typing the final draft of his essay on horror fiction, supernatural horror in literature. For quite some time, Lovecraft was over the idea of aliens being all too human within pop culture and fiction. So his goal for The Color Out of Space was to create an entity that was entirely alien, so foreign to the human mind that many could not conceive it. In doing so, he drew inspiration from a number of sources describing colors outside of the visible spectrum. Most notably, Hugh Elliott's Modern Science and Materialism is a 1919 nonfiction book that mentions the extremely limited senses of humans, such that of many ethereal waves striking the eyes, the majority cannot be perceived by the retina at all. Lovecraft had used this concept previously in his 1920 short story From Beyond, but this time he wanted to dive deeper into that subject matter. The Color Out of Space first appeared in Hugo Jernbach's science fiction magazine Amazing Stories in September 1927. I genuinely believe that H.P. Lovecraft was a man way before his time. I mean, even to the point in 1908 where he suffered a major breakdown, a hysteroid seizure, which is similar to a typical depression. But in a letter about the event, Lovecraft did say that he could hardly bear to see or speak to anyone. And even as a young kid, classmates really belittled H.P. Lovecraft heavily. They described him as having terrible tics and suddenly jumping while sitting in a seat. And he did have his downfalls from being very racist, from having a fear of cultural, ethnic, and racial diversity around him. He had some weird sexual phobias. A very misanthropic worldview, very lone wolf, kept to himself. And it's safe to say that he did suffer from severe obsessive-compulsive disorder, and he was obsessed with details, revising his stories over and over. He also had a penchant for counting his steps, washing his hands repeatedly, and obsessively checking locks, which all stems from some sort of anxiety, as we know now. But back in the fucking early 1900s, I'm sure he was exiled by many. He felt like he had a dark cloud hovering over him, and mental health just wasn't looked at the same as it is now. And through his dark, morbid, and sick mind, from mental health issues to his upbringing to his small-minded New England nature, even though it's quite ironic, because even though his depictions of stories and horror was otherworldly, like we have the brilliant Cthulhu brought up by him, but at the same time he was afraid of other cultures, worldly views, and opinions that weren't his own. It's just a weird, fascinating concept to think about. But if you guys want me to do a deep dive on H.P. Lovecraft's life, let's get this video to 20 likes. Many people fucked with the story, it creeped a lot of people out, and there had been many adaptations. Most recently, the 2019 adaptation starring Nicolas Cage, the fucking legend himself, which was written and directed by a South African filmmaker named Richard Stanley. He was known for 1990's Hardware and 1992 Dust Devil. And he was also the original director of The Island of Dr. Moreau, the 1996 cult classic, but was fired early into principal photography due to creative differences. So let's just say that this was a passion project for the man. The newer film, visibly striking, has phenomenal cinematography, some outlandish acting from Nick Cage himself. Nathan Gardner moves his family, including children Lavinia, Benny, and Jack, to his late father's farm. One night, a brilliant colored meteorite crash lands into the front yard near the well. The next morning, hydrologist Ward Phillips, who is surveying the area for a dam development, along with the mayor and sheriff of the nearby town Arkham, arrives to see the meteor. Nathan and Lavinia later witness strange phenomena around the meteor until it suddenly disappears. Like I said, as gritty as that movie is, and it builds a lot of tension, has a great score, atmosphere and ambiance to it. Here at the Drip Fed Dread, we talk nostalgia and we talk the old movies. We talk about who did it first, not only who did it first, but possibly who did it right. Sorry, I was just reading some crazy thing on the news. That was weird. So what better to talk about The Curse from 1987, the first film, which this movie is internationally known as The Farm. And it is David Keith's directorial debut, the man behind things such as The Lords of Discipline, Firestarter, White of the Eye, or most notably our man Boone from The Indian in the Cupboard. And although the town in the story Color Out of Space is set in Arkham, Massachusetts, which is a fictional town created by H.P. Lovecraft, The Curse decided to set its farming community in Tennessee, which begins to infect the land and its residents. The Curse is a first movie in a pentology series of horror movies that were all unconnected films that were retitled to be a part of a supernatural franchise for the American home video market. I did get a comment recently back that someone said I should do a deep dive on the entire franchise, and I plan on doing that still, but I got a bunch of other commitments to the channel that I'm working on, so I thought I'd start with the first one because the idea captivated me, so stay tuned for a full deep dive of the franchise, potentially. And even though this came out in 1987, this was not the first adaptation of The Color Out of Space. The first one was from 1957 entitled Die, Monster, Die, which stars icon Boris Karloff and Nick Adams. David Keith, who was a native of Knoxville, utilized his farm property in Tellico Plains, Tennessee for the film, while the interiors were shot in Rome. Many of the crew members who were Italian were billed under American names, including associate producer Lucio Fulci, and the actor Treat Williams, who we know and love from one of my favorite Tales from the Crypt episodes of all time, was actually billed to star in this movie, but backed out due to certain reasons. And there's a little gossip that Will Wheaton said recently on a blog that many of the child labor laws were broken on the set of this movie. And during some of the scenes of the movie, you can kind of quite tell, but Will Wheaton is a childhood legend. He is up there with Corey Feldman, Dan Bonaducci, and NPH, so man made it through the wilderness. But the main story that we're here to talk about is the film, which teenage boy Zach lives on a farm in Tellico Plains, Tennessee with his mother Frances, younger sister Alice, and their stern and pompous old stepfather Nathan Crane, accompanied by his unpleasant piece of shit, dim-witted, dumb, ditzy fucking stepbrother Cyrus. Dude, that character sucks. And there's something spatial and from another galaxy that comes down and kind of poisons the well and the water and the crops and all around them. And as the family tries to fight for survival, let's just say this intergalactic being descends this family into madness. And the movie is a slow burn. I will say that. I will give you that much. It's a slow burn. It starts off building the characters, deep diving into the family. A lot of the time is a family drama. Really learning to rally for Will Wheaton's character and his little sister, the mother who's kind of on the back and forth spectrum of defending her kids and being a pushover to the stepfather. And the stepfather, who is very maniacal and egotistical, does do a great role in this film. The father, played by Claude Atkins, he was very disciplinary and stubborn, and though he was callous and seemed to only care about the finances of the farm and the well-being of this family, you could feel a strong evil brewing in him long before the spatial entity even came to Earth to manipulate him too. So very unlikable character, again with the son Cyrus, just like the typical stupid older brother, but they couldn't even make him charming or attractive or like likably hated. Like the second he comes on the frame, it's like he's just a fucking idiot. He's just a dumbass, dude. Like every single scene he's in, I guess you can pay it homage to the actor for delivering a performance that's unlikable, but it's different because the dad, he just has great acting ability and an eeriness to him and something that you don't want to mess with. But the dude they casted to be the teenage brother, you're like, dude, he was just insufferable to watch. And you're like, I feel like the dude that played him is just as much of a jackass in real life. I'm not trying to speculate. I don't know the man's. One night, the mother, Frances, sneaks out of the house while Nathan is asleep and begins to have sex with Mike, a farmhand who lives in a nearby shack. Suddenly, a large meteor crashes onto the property, emitting an eerie glow. Which, this scene is obviously important for two reasons. The first one is we see the unfaithfulness from the wife. She's trying to be the best mother she can, but there's something about her that is clearly devastated and detached from her husband because he's just such a strongly religious man, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but everything he seems to do seems to be hypocritical, where he's like, she tries to make a move on him that night, and he's like, a woman shall never make an advance on a man. I fucking have a high ego and a tiny little dick, so I make moves. And just everything he does is so superficial and shallow, and then she just sees this farmhand, Mike, and she's like, oh my god, he's a tall drink of water. Let me get some of that. oh, let me get some of that. Oh. So she goes out to bang him, and then this is where we get the scene of, I just found a cool concept as this infidelity's going on. That's when we get the key plot point of the meteor crashing down, setting up the carnage that's about to ensue on this small community. And then there's Alan Forbes, who is a physician who lives nearby. He visits the crash site to examine the meteor. He cares about the community, so he's like, yo, I'm gonna check out this meteor crash by the neighbor's house and try to see if I can figure something out, you know? Maybe he's being nosy, or maybe he just cares. Upon examination, he finds out that the meteor is large, with a hard shell from which is a noxious liquid oozes out. And before long, the object dissolves into a glowing gelatinous liquid that seeps into the soil. The mysterious liquid soon begins to affect the farm. And the only one that seems to be catching on to it, obviously the physician, he's getting like little bits and pieces of uncanny behavior, but first and foremost is the young son, Zach, who is witnessing it all, like from the weird growths growing on his mother's face to how she's kind of being zombified and like robotic and just acting strange. It seems to target the mother first, and you can't really tell at first if it's targeting the stepfather and the stepson because they're just douchebags in general, but it's obviously affecting the mother and it's affecting the animals. The one horse goes apeshit and starts to attack one of the kids. The chickens brutally attack the little girl, and you're like, dude, these animals are going chaotic. And then stepdad's like, what? They're on antibiotics. The kids were probably just messing around with the animals. It's like, dude, you're so delusional. And then they think they're being blessed. So many people in this town, they want to buy the farm because they're like, dude, this is a great asset. There's this one dude who's a minor character that keeps coming in and trying to buy the farm. And in one scene with all these, it seems like nature gave prosperity to the land and harvest all these giant, juicy, beautiful apples. And the stepdad and the family are like, maybe we are on the come up, as they give the apple to the man trying to buy the property as like a peace offering, like, get out of here, we're not selling. He bites into the apple, and every single apple is infested with worms, and you're like, damn, that's insanely gross. The anticipation and insanity is ramping up. Zach is kind of fighting for his life, trying to protect his mother instead of the father's clutches, to the point where he's like, I'm not even going to drink the water and eat the food. And the dad's like, there's nothing wrong with this food. He's just being stubborn. He's just one of those old-headed people that you're like, dude, takes everything so personal, thinks he's the big man of the town, big fucking head honcho, but he's just as soft as Continental toilet paper. The neighbor Forbes, he secretly obtains a sample of the water from the well, and he goes to get it analyzed because he's like, something ain't right here. He has it analyzed in a nearby lab, and the water is found to contain a strange unknown element which is altering its metabolical properties and molecular structure. And then there's an introduction to the character Carl Willis, who is a TVA representative who is surveying the local area for the planned reservoir, enters the Crane's house looking for a glass of water, helping himself from the kitchen faucet. He like knocks on the door respectively. He's like, hello, is anyone here? He goes to have some water, and you're like, please, stranger, don't drink this water. It's going to fuck you up. Let's just say the mother goes mad and tries to attack and kill him with a knife. And then as he's fighting for his life, stepdad Crane comes in and he's like, dude, do you ever knock? Get out of my house. And sends him running, showing that the mom is devolving heavily into some sort of like barbaric creature, or whatever substance is in this water, changing its molecules and compounds of it is really making these people not quite zombies, obviously, but very strange and supernatural. And this brings up a scene I want to talk about that kind of scared the britches off me, my 30-year-old britches. There's this one scene where the dude who's constantly going around trying to, buy the land, stumbles upon onto the farm into a dark, dank basement, and he doesn't stumble upon it, he's running because a bunch of dogs attack him and his partner, and he's like fleeing. He's like, dude, I'm out of here. Like, who let the dogs out? And he goes down to the cellar to dwell, and we get the reveal of the monstrosity taking over of the mom, who has slowly, as we see throughout the movie, becoming unhinged, growing boils on her face, warts, becoming very weird, doing some weird stuff to her family members, speaking out of terms, very in a trance. So when he goes down in there and we get a quick little glimpse of her walk by, it's quite terrifying, and the build of her is quite freaky as well. Like, this is one of those scenes, I know I say this a lot, that if I saw this as a kid, I'd be pretty creeped out, I feel like. And I feel like it was very effective, and it really kickstarted the horror in it, because up until the scene, the movie wasn't quite terrifying. It was just more eerie and supernatural, and from there, the movie kind of kickstarts. And as the movie builds, Nathan ends up getting affected, Cyrus ends up getting affected, and it pretty much comes down to just Zach and his little sister, with the help of Forbes, the neighbor, to hopefully rectify this insane issue. All accumulate into the final scene of the house where the young boy tries to save his mother and save his sister from the aliens, the house crumbling and everything going around. It's a very climactic and intense scene, that which I could see looking back now why Will Wheaton said the child labor laws were obscured, because even watching the filming of that last scene, I was like, dude, there's no way that was safe. I even thought that before I knew Will Wheaton said that, so that's crazy. But it's just an effective ending that really builds up and is quite fascinating to witness. But yeah, all around the movie was pretty good. I feel like the director and production did a fine job of telling a very eerie, supernatural, cosmic story with a hint of heavy realism to it, from that family dynamic to the slow build of the water kind of causing harm and dismay to the community, and how it kind of focused more on this family. There's one key part of the story that kind of starts off the movie and finishes up the movie that kind of ties the story more together, but I didn't want to quite spoil that because I feel like it's integral to the movie's plot, where it might spoil some characters, motives, and other ideas that I didn't want to quite give away to everyone. But yeah, Will Wheaton shows time and time again he is an exceptional actor as a young adult. The whole family had a chemistry, from the eerie, from, you know, you could feel the kids' disdain towards the father and fear of him, how much the mother was the anchor and how much they loved her. As she slowly started to descend, you felt bad for the young girl and Will Wheaton's character because of how much they loved their mother and how much they saw her struggle. I feel like the biggest takeaway from this movie that makes it unique and one of a kind is very attached to the hip of the initial story by H.P. Lovecraft, which is the representation of the cosmic alien entity that is beyond human comprehension. Like, essentially it's a manifestation of a color that exists outside of our visible spectrum. A lot of time in these 80s movies we see these gigantic monsters, little B-movie sci-fi UFOs, you know, milk carton aliens, very run-of-the-mill creatures, blobs, messes, intricate foreign beings. But this one really stands out because it causes a madness and a horrific mutation in anyone that touches it, signifying the terrifying nature of the unknown and the limitations of human perception when confronted with true alien forces. Like, this is an alien molecular devil. Being beyond human understanding is very interesting too, because yes, in this movie it takes place in a liquid, in the water, in the fruit, in the overall atmosphere of the farm, and you don't quite see a creature, and that's actually more haunting than seeing a monster, other than the infection it gives the humans. But they're not becoming the monsters themselves, they're just becoming infected by what the alien is capable of doing. And the fact that you don't know what part of space it comes from, how it just landed on Earth from a meteor. Is it some sort of intergalactic plague, or is it a designed, very clever creature doing this, or just a freak accident? And this movie focuses heavily on the psychological aspect of aliens, which I find to be quite intriguing. But if you guys haven't seen my previous video, I did a little thing on the WWE and all the movies they produced, but I talked about one in particular that I thought was very intriguing, See No Evil, starring the man Kane, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Also check out my top 10 Tales from the Crypt video. We got a bunch of bangers on this channel, and I know you would love them. If you love this one, you'd love the other ones just as much. So, alright guys, have you seen this movie? Comment down below and let me know what you think. What movies do you want to see me review next? I'm going to do so much more, but I would always love to do a recommended video. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe, give me a thumber, hit that ding-ling button, or asking you, telling you, hey, it's me, I'm here, and I'm going to say it one time for the one time and two time for the O's. Give me a hell yeah for horror.